10 p.m., the river thinking of its last effects. The bridge is empty. I think you would have left the party late, declining a ride home, and no one notices now the moist hat brims between the thumbs of farmers in Beatrice, Nebraska. The men in their suits, ill-fitting, bought on sale, the orange moon of foreclosures. And abandoning the car, how you soloed, finally, lending it the fabulous touch of your absence. You'd call that style, to stand with an unlit cigarette in one corner of your mouth, admiring the sun on Alcatraz. A shout. I precede you in emergencies. I betray you in dark places, killing silence. I can be welcome or warning, dress in fear or great joy. I have no preference. I exist only in departure. I leave you breathless. Wheel. I was the beginning. Now my children surround you. You gave them your hands. Now they have become you. You entrusted me with your directions, forgetting I was a circle. Steadily, I carry you toward your finish. Sword. Carried, I am your decoration. Swung, I become you. Born of earth, drawn from fire, I am blamed for your troubles. I am guiltless. You alone are the weapon you are trying to put down. Rain. I am nothing when not falling. Touching you, I am cold. You may run from me. Touching the earth, I change, changing it. You may hide. Everything that grows, grows from my body. You would die without me. Arrow. I am a song until I stop. Stop me. You trapped me, dug for me, and cut me down. Now stop me. You gave me to friends, brothers, even enemies. Now stop me. I return you to the earth, wrapped in wood, blind to the sky. Crow. You know, the dorm out there, there's a fantastic crow colony that is very active from about 5 in the morning to 7. Crow. My color is the color of fear. My sound is of a knife against bone. If I rest, it is only to watch you. Flying, I draw darkness behind me like a net. Now it is over you. Now it is falling. The book is golden, with an orange spine, and the girl reading leans back in her chair, one leg outstretched, the other tucked up, one foot on the edge of the seat. Because of her short red skirt and purple halter, her bare legs and feet, you decide the room is hot, that it's a midsummer evening. But the girl reading has forgotten the evening, the house around her, the city beyond her, has forgotten her small body tucked into her chair. Instead, she is encompassed by her book in the way one is surrounded by a sunlit summer morning, except her head is turned slightly to one side, as if she found the page too bright. All this is a painting you have seen often, and often you have wondered what the girl is reading. At first you thought her book was something frightening, the way her head is turned from the page, the way she has forgotten the presence of her body. It is a long, thin book, too thin for a novel, and you've come to think it must be poetry. Seeing her makes you remember the first time you read a poem that moved you, not even realizing it was a poem, but feeling you saw yourself on the page, saw yourself with nothing to redeem you as a creature who wears his body like an ill-fitting suit of clothes. Perhaps you would have laid aside your book. But so completely was the world lifted out of its daily banality that you kept on reading. What had your world been until then? First you ate something, then you bought something, then you went bowling. A world where men passed their lives peering under the hoods of cars. And like the girl in the painting, you must have turned your head slightly, as if from a loud noise. And you too became like someone who is left on a journey, someone who has become the answer to his own impossible riddle, who condemned to a room is at last free of the room. By now, I bet he's dead, which suits me fine. But 25 years ago, when we were both 15, and he was a camper and I counselor in a straight-laced Pennsylvania summer camp for crippled and retarded kids, I'd watch him sit all day by himself on a hill, no trees or sharp stones. He wasn't safe to be around. The slightest bruise, and all his blood would simply drain away. It drove us crazy, first to protect him, then to see it happen. I would hang around him picturing a knife or a pointed stick, wondering how small a cut you'd have to make, then see the expectant face of another boy watching me, and we each knew how much the other would like to see him bleed. He made us want to hurt him so much we hurt ourselves instead. Sliced fingers in craft class, busted noses in baseball, then joined at last in the mass wrestling matches beneath his hill, a tangle of crutches and braces hammering at each other to keep from harming him. I'd look up from slamming a kid in the gut and watch him and see him watching with the empty blue eyes of children in sentimental paintings and hope to see him frown or grin, but there was nothing, as if he had already died. Then, after a week, they sent him home. Too much responsibility, the director said. Hell, I bet the kid had skin like leather. Even so, I'd lie in bed at night and think of busting into his room with a sharp stick, lash and break the space around his rose-petaled flesh, while campers and bunks around me tossed and dreamt of poking and bashing the bleeder until he was left as flat as a punctured water balloon, which is why the director sent him home. For what is virtue but the lack of strong temptation? Better to leave us with our lie of being good. Did he know this? Sitting on his private hill, watching us smash each other with crutches and canes, was this his pleasure? To make us cringe beneath our wish to do him damage? But then who cared? We were the living children, he the ghost, and what he gave us was a sense of being bad together. He took us from our private spite and offered our bullying a common cause, which is why we missed him, even though we wished him harm. When he left, we lost our shared meanness, and each of us was left to snarl his way into a separate future, eager to discover some new loser to link us in frailty again. My daughter, baby Cleo, lies on her back on the sheepskin rug, jerking her arms and feet like a turtle stuck upside down in the dirt, struggling to get up. But here there is no threat, I tell myself. The room is benign and I act for the best. She is just contentedly wriggling. It is nothing like a turtle flipped over while 2 or 3 crows sidle closer, eager to pluck her soft parts. The room is safe, and I direct my life to keep it like that. How much is this a fiction I believe in? We are forced to live in a place without walls, and I build her shelter with bits of paper. The ever-attentive beaks surround us. These beaks, these birds, are her future. Face of a teacher, face of a thief, one with the face of her father. Here comes the woman who wears the plastic prick hooked to a string around her waist, the man who puts girls' panties like a beanie on his head, the chicken molester, the lady who likes Great Danes, the boy who likes sheep, the old fellow who likes to watch turkeys dance on the top of a hot stove, the bicycle seat sniffer, grasshopper muncher, the bubbles in the bath biter. They all meet each night at midnight, and oh Lord, they bowl from 12 to 6. From 12 to 6, they take it out on the pins as they discuss their foibles with their friends. I'm trying to cut down, says the woman who nibbles the tails of mice. I've thrown away my Zippo, says the man who sticks matches between people's toes. There is nothing that can't become a pleasure if one lets it. And so they bowl. They think of that oddly handsome German Shepherd face, and they bowl. Their hands quiver at the thought of jamming their fingers in a car door, and they bowl. These are the heroes, these grocers and teachers and postmen and plumbers. They bring snapshots of themselves and Scotch tape, then fix their photos to the pins, and they bowl. They focus on their faces at the end of the alley, and they bowl. They see the hunger in their eyes, the twist of anticipation in their lips, and oh, they bowl. Bowl to remember, bowl to forget, as the pins with their own bruised faces explode from midnight to 6, while in those explosions of wood in which each pin describes an exact arc, they feast on those moments when the world seems to stop and everything conspires to push some fleeting beauty, ripening peach or blossoming rose to the queer brink of perfection where it flames, flickers, fades, and is never perfect again. He must have been born with greased feet to keep sliding so. Born at the pinnacle of a glass hill and then released. A life spent in the articulation of hellos and goodbyes. How many times has he carried boxes through doorways? The key turns in the ignition, the view in the rearview mirror repeats itself, and once more his tires caress the road, their only love. He had hoped to stop this. He had thought that by buying things, he could hang possessions from his body like sandbags from a balloon. He had thought that by acquiring a wife and family, he was at last planting himself, his 2 feet sunk knee-deep in concrete, but anything can be packed, and his children's heads peek cunningly from their cartons. At best, he can slow the rate of departure, not move faster and faster, to take pleasure in the experienced moment, not the next one, the potential one. Still, he is often seen when returning to visit some place he had left some years before, the same people sitting at the same tables in the same cafes, the same jokes, same love affairs, the same houses being painted over and over, lives fixed like stones along a stream, watching the water chortle by, the same weather, even the same birds twittering overhead. Better fashion from his life a boat, with nothing to catch him but time itself, that distant cataract. Better take with him only those few possessions he values. The wing of a sparrow to remind him of his loyalties, a blue glass marble to teach him the folly of standing still, and a box of air, pure air, to show him where he has come from and what lies ahead. In the workshop for transitional children, menacing faces are fashioned from wax. Then bones are formed from fabric and sticks, muscular arms, and a torso hanging down. The faces are painted, made grim, given a hat. Look, these aren't guys you'd want to fight. At last a harness is attached to its back, and the puppet, what else to call it, is all set. Let's follow one out on the street. The child hoists the frame onto his shoulders and staggers into a crowd jam-packed with similar creatures. How terrible are their faces. The children yell, shake the puppets at each other. They swagger. Frequently, the child returns to the factory to have his puppet's ugly kisser made uglier. Add a surly glare, a scar. Truly, it's a monster. But under the machinery, lipstick, and paint, the child is hunkered down, trying to figure what to do next, how to live, how to endure the loneliness. Years pass. Solitude accumulates. As the puppet gets meaner, it gets heavier. The child wants to let it drop, but then who would protect him? The child hasn't a clue. By now the puppet has a creased brow, cruel stare, a lopsided smirk lit by a wreckage of dental work. Doesn't this show the child has won his battle? From the outside, we imagine a soul utterly brutal, but on the inside, the child only feels burnt out. Then his costume is taken from him, placed in a hole in the ground, and the child at last resigns. How light he feels as he hurries on the green lawns where the sun is rising and his friends waiting. The snapper seats his subjects on the couch. The grieving father, 2 sons and a daughter. Okay, he says, let's do it. Tell them now. They live in a trailer, a rundown mobile home near Pontiac. The boy is 6 or 7. The snapper seats them in a row on the couch. For skill and gall, he excels all the others as the top news photographer at either paper. Okay, he says, let's do it. Tell them now. When Police Beat phoned about the accident, he bolted his lunch, drove straight from Detroit. He fixes his lights, seats the kids on the couch. Even the toughest reporters dispute his technique, the good and bad of it, while praising his cheek, like the day he told the father, tell them now. The wife, a waitress, was killed in a car wreck. The kids only know that something awful took place. The snapper seats his subjects on the couch. Okay, he says, let's do it. Tell them now. As the lark hates the snake, so is salt antithetical to sugar, and so does the dark despise the light. Consequently, how sweet is the alert affection the pickpockets bear for the evangelists who gather in the square with their guitars and singing and white shirts, their upraised Bibles and praise of El Señor. And like luscious peaches ripening on a branch, people just off work turn toward the music, which, if lively, draws a tightly packed crowd. The infectious vitality and heartfelt singing, this is when the plump fruit reaches its peak, and pickpockets praise a dark lord of their own as they stroll among the heavily laden boughs. Just as the casual stroller comes to a street intending to jaywalk and looks both ways at the speeding cars, so the Greek gods came to time, turning toward past and future with equal ease. The big trucks rushing toward them out of tomorrow were easily avoided. Fire engines, ambulances, The gods simply waited. As for us, we approach time's busy boulevard only to find a one-way street, and we peer off in the wrong direction as traffic rushes toward us out of the other, our future, and try to gather the data to decide when to leap. Mostly, the gods refuse to help us, even though they may like us. Brave little tykes, they say, as we jump in front of a speeding dump truck. For our amusement, we have TV, even books. For their amusement, the gods have us. And as we can skip forward a few pages during a scary part, so the gods know what is coming. So how touching in the Iliad, when Hector was deciding how to act as Achilles dashed up to chop him into dog meat. Should Hector fight, hightail it, or maybe surrender? The gods looked from their clouds and said, how cute, because already they saw Hector dead in the dirt. Our lives, those true life dramas which we take so seriously, they watch as soap opera, or worse, as Saturday morning cartoon shows, because what immortality and the knack to look both ways gives the gods is deficiency. They need not change, so do not change. Why fret? What can hurt them? Only vanity and appetite propel them forward. But consider the human creature waiting at time's steep curb, calculating what has been, scrutinizing the mercuric masses of mighty metal now departing to gain an inkling about what might be approaching. He sees periods of calm, periods of heavy traffic, and reaches his decision, not always mistaken. No doubt about it. The prospect of destruction gives us a brain. The chance of a garbage truck squashing our heads provides a real education. And soon we resemble those street-smart city kids, dodging cars, snatching rides on the backs of buses, while in gray stretch limousines with smoked windows ride the gods, lounging lazily on tucked leather, gazing at tiny TVs stuck into the back seats. And what do they see on those miniature screens? Why, they are watching us. They observe us jump between two fat trucks and they say, how clever. They see us crushed by a blue bus and say, how sad. Jesus agreed to send out for Chinese. Styrofoam containers were placed before the disciples. All received 2 egg rolls. Mark taught Luke how to work the chopsticks. James overturned his hot and sour soup. Matthew and John each got 1 wonton. Thomas wouldn't share his mushu pork. As typically happens, the rice was cold, the tea boiling hot. Simon burned his tongue. Jesus made brief remarks about the future. Peter received a fortune, but no cookie. Judas got a cookie without a fortune. Outside, the soldiers marched past unheard, often the case when one is having fun. This is how it was. He lived in a palace, which was also a prison. You understand how nothing is ever simple. He had built a labyrinth for the king's monster son, a great service, which came with a secret, one for the king, one on the builder's head. Be reasonable. Could the king ever permit him to return to the easy conversations of Athens? But because the king was grateful, no luxury was spared in the palace, which was also a prison. Wherever one turned, one found beauty and opulence, gorgeous wall hangings, thick rugs, soft cushions. All entertainments were prepared for him, from the scholarly to the perverse, the moist flesh of children, stimulants to engender the sweetest dreams. Still, the door was locked, and after he had walked through the rooms and saw what was to be seen, he ripped apart the feather cushions and made himself a pair of wings. By morning he was gone. How we love these stories. Consider Adam and Eve. Wasn't the garden for them a similar prison? And Satan, as he foresaw an eternity of heaven's coercive beauty, what could he do but rebel? A knot of string cross-sticks a dab of ink. Can't any work begin as a passionate doodling? So here is another of his constructions, a wooden cow, but so skillful even the bull was tricked. You see, one must reckon with the jaded boredom of queens. During the drawn-out days she lusted for this bull. What was he? Beef on the hoof, nothing special. But she stood at the fence and watched his bull's prick, its muscularity, its obscene forcefulness, until she couldn't live without that dazzle within her. So she went to the artist, and he made a cow that the queen could hide herself within. The bull mounted the cow, but it was she, her aroused wetness. And the artist, can he be blamed for the ends for which he used his gift? He was the maker. It was his sickness. It masked what was made. Consider this. He never heard her brute moaning. Never discount what began his wanderings. In Athens, he was the greatest craftsman. So much work he had to hire his nephew to help him. But his nephew had his gift, and soon people claimed the nephew's gift was greater than the uncle's. If the uncle built with bronze, the nephew built with gold. So his uncle worried and fussed, and at last he killed him, who also loved him. You see, he had no other choice. To be outdone meant to accept his obliteration. For this murder he was banished from his homeland. But he had not reckoned on the arguments of the dead, how they hold the last word on all subjects. He would make the statue of a god or a bauble for a queen, then lift it up to the specter of his nephew. See this? He would say, could you ever make this? And of course, the nephew was silent, itself an answer, the better answer. The uncle worked harder. Statues and buildings became grander, and the uncle's traveling was ceaseless. He became known as the greatest of all craftsmen. You understand how fate can trick you. Without his nephew's murder, he would never have become famous. Yet what pleasure could he take in each new marvel, palace, or temple, when, in its glossy surfaces, he kept confronting the dead face he loved? What else could the boy have done? Wasn't flight both an escape and a great uplifting? And so he flew. But how could he appreciate his freedom without knowing the exact point where freedom stopped? So he flew upward, and the sun dissolved the wax, and he fell. But at least in his anticipated plummeting, he grasped the confines of what had been his liberty. You say he flew too far? He flew just far enough. He flew precisely to the point of wisdom. Would it have been better to flutter ignorantly from petal to petal within some garden forever? As a result, flight for him was not upward escape, but descent, with his wings disintegrating around him. Should it matter that neither shepherd nor farmer with his plow watched him fall? He now had his answer, laws to uphold him in his downward plunge, cushion enough for what he wanted. So often in this world, what is rejected creeps back to the heart. What is cast off again jams the brain. Remember Daedalus, at the end of his life, gone to Sardinia as builder for the son of Heracles. But faces fretted his memory, and he began to make bronze dolls with movable limbs, forming their faces into the faces he once loved. Here was the son who tumbled into the sea. Here was his wife. Here was his sister who hanged herself, the nephew he murdered, the great king he had betrayed, and others. Their shapes filled the room. He clothed them and put hair on their heads. He placed small devices in their hearts so they could walk and lift their arms. They grouped in a circle around him, but they remained silent. He tried to make them talk. He cut the tongues from birds and made boxes through which the air swirled to create a wailing, but still the creatures wouldn't speak. So Daedalus disguised his voice, making it like a woman's, then a boy's. "You are forgiven," he said, but the bronze dolls jittered their arms. But when people passing on the street heard him call out, they jeered at him. You see, his gift stopped short of what he wanted most. "You are forgiven," he shrieked to the dumb things. But he spoke falsely. His trinkets gave no relief. Was this the wisdom to come to him last, that nothing could rid him of his isolation? His toys no longer hid what was there, himself and the night, and the only entry into night. Thank you.